I've caught a lot of big fish on cypress trees at home on spinner baits. But the thing is, you got to make multiple casts. That tree is that fish's home, and you have to, a lot of times he may be swimming on the backside of the tree and you make that first cast and he just didn't even see your bait. So you have to give the fish a lot of different angles so they make sure they see your bait, and then also you present it to them in a way that that fish really wants to eat the bait. And also irregularities. That's one of my favorite things to fish when I'm fishing trees. This goes for flooded timber and for cypress trees. And those are the two types of trees I'm going to focus mostly on, because those are my two pride and joys, is flooded timber and cypress trees. I have fished a lot of willow trees, and a willow tree is a great tree, but back home we don't have a whole bunch as they do out west. The main thing with willow trees is when that water's rising, those trees are going to be good. But what I mean by irregularities is back home we have a lot of cypress trees, but every now and then we'll get, say, a tupelo tree. It's a completely different type of tree, and that's something those fish will key in on sometimes. But like I said earlier, all trees and fish are patternable, and it changes day to day. But once you find that pattern in the day, they might be on those tupelos for the day, or they might be on a cluster of trees. You want to find that irregularity, because when you find 1,000 trees on a flat, something's going to be different. If you have 1,000 trees and there's one patch of grass, they may be on that patch of grass that day. But when you have 1,000 yards of grass and there's 2 trees in there, that's an irregularity. There's something different. They're most likely going to be on the trees that day. I mean, they might not be there, but it's something different, and that's what fish key on. It's usually just something a little bit different. And one of my favorite things for flooded timber for irregularities is, a lot of times we're fishing, I'm going to go back to this other slide. We're fishing pole timber like this. It's a bunch of stick-up trees, bunch of stick-ups, but you'll get a little cluster or something like that where one will branch out, one will be bigger, because fishing flooded timber, it's identical to walking through the woods. Like if you got a little hunting lease or your little place you deer hunt, when you walk through the woods and you see the different types of trees, you can notice when you find a big oak tree, how much bigger that tree is and there's nothing else around it. And it's the same way, that all was a flooded forest. That all was a forest one time before it was flooded. So a lot of times if you want to know what you're fishing, when you're fishing flooded timber, just walk through the woods. Walk through your backyard, you can see the different types of trees and how they set up, and that's a good way to have an idea of what's underwater. But when I'm fishing flooded timber and I'm looking for irregularities, I'll look for lay down trees at a 45. That is a really good pattern, and the reason for that is shade. Shade is the biggest thing that helps with fishing trees. That's for cypress trees as well. Sometimes the bushier the tree and the lower it hangs to the water, the better that cypress tree is. It's harder to get your bait in there, but when you get your bait in there, it's a better chance because, Ott Defoe said this one time, fish don't have eyelids. And a lot of times they'll hide in shade because it helps them attack. They're predators. They're there to ambush things. And when that fish is in the shade and some bait fish come swimming by and they're in the sun, they can't really see into those shadows as well. And that's a big philosophy that I use for fishing timber and cypress trees. But those laid down trees provide a little bit of shade. They sit on there, but it's an irregularity because you have a whole flooded timber field and there might be one tree that's laid down, or you'll have one tree that's a little bit bigger, and those are the things that I really kind of key in on that help break up the monotony of just kind of going through that whole forest. And when I am fishing flooded timber, a lot of times it could be like, say, listen, we're here in Anderson County. We're here in Anderson, right at Lake Hartwell. We got a couple months away from the Classic, but flooded timber will play. It's a different type of flooded timber than what you see there because it's mostly underwater. And those fish, the spotted bass, those largemouth, they follow the blueback herring through those flooded timber fields. We might be fishing, the flooded timber edge and the end of the flooded timber in the creek channels. And like I was saying, you want to ignore the timber to a point where you want to find the structure, you find the creek channel, you find the bait, and then you're fishing the timber when you find all that stuff. You don't want to necessarily just find timber because there's timber and trees everywhere. You want to find where's the bait at, where are they going to? And that's the biggest thing when you're fishing trees. Know your lake, know where the fish are going to spawn, know where they winter at, and they'll use those trees to transition as well. Where you'll catch fish on this tree and you won't catch them for another year there and you don't know why. Well, that type of tree might be an area those fish are transitioning through to the back of the creek where they're going to spawn on this tree, and then they're going to leave and they're going to set up for be pre-spawn and post-spawn on those trees on the points. So just because you've caught some good fish on that tree before doesn't mean it's always good. It's just good at certain times of the year. So remember to keep that honest.
And the information Bass University provides isn't your basic run-of-the-mill fishing video. This is specific information from A to Z to help you learn, get to the water, and become a better angler quickly.